We move now on, as we approach 11 o'clock, to our last panel around the sustainability theme, which is headed Achieving Carbon Neutral Position, What is the Point? And will involve a discussion between, once again, Diana from Positive Luxury, but also Clive Jackson, who is not related to me, I hasten to add, probably for his benefit, and he is CEO of Fly Victor. So that will be moderated by Andrew Stevenson, who is Marketing Director at Treasure Data and our sponsor. Thank you, guys.
Great. Thank you so much, Tim. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. So I'm Andrew Stevenson, Marketing Director for Treasure Data, and I'm very pleased to be here to be discussing carbon neutrality. And before I introduce our expert panelists, who I'm really excited to talk to, and it's nice to see Diana on the other side of the fence now and sitting in the panel rather than doing the hosting. I just want to take a couple of minutes to kind of set the scene somewhat on what is a very, very lively subject indeed. And I think Forbes puts it quite eloquently in that at first sight, luxury is well positioned to move freely in the sustainability space. You know, the products are durable by nature, they're made from the highest quality materials, and there's this culture of transmission across generations, of passing on kind of luxury items that kind of pervades the whole. So luxury should be saving the planet without even trying, right? Or so you'd think. But on the other hand, I guess seen from a different light, luxury is far from being exemplary, and given the chance, you know, it will kind of grow at all costs. It will feed people with the desire for new needs, and it spread the word exclusivity like this wildfire across the globe. So I think suffice to say, there's many contradictions to the way the industry operates, and it can't yet kind of call itself sustainable. So that said, we do see a growing number of firms. We've discussed it already earlier in the program. They're launching carbon neutral initiatives. It's kind of in a bid to boost their green goals. And there's lots of luxury brands like Kering and Porsche and Gabriela Hearst, amongst many others, that have established these carbon offset programs and carbon neutral supply chains and various green initiatives. And as luxury companies aspire to make themselves increasingly sustainable, will carbon offsetting alone move the needle? So I think that's one side of it. And in addition to the corporate pledges and the work we do with corporate social responsibility and the likes, some companies have even taken a step further and have also used carbon offsets in an effort to get their customers involved. Porsche, for example, they negate the impact of their people who buy their products and drive them. They negate the impact of that through carbon offsetting. They've got this Porsche Impact program, which is, enables owners to calculate their own personal emissions and then donate to projects that counteract this, kind of, removing the guilt associated or the dissonance felt by some customers with the purchase. So I think this all sounds fantastic and it's heading in the right direction. And what is the challenge with this, you may ask? And you'd be right in theory, but it's in practice, I think, where these promises begin to fall down, I think, and we see the curtain being pulled back to reveal the wizard. For example, there's few concrete, we were talking about it again earlier, there's a few concrete standard guidelines for achieving net zero or indeed carbon neutral emissions. So companies and countries can essentially create their own definitions and almost measure their own successes, which feels a bit counterintuitive. And then added to this, just two more points on this, that the Task Force on Scaling Voluntary Carbon Markets showed that less than actually 5% of carbon offsets actually take carbon from the atmosphere. So there's a lot of contradiction happening. And then added to these findings, there's a simple truth that some of these plans aren't even realistic, because Oxfam did a report on this and they calculated the total land required for planned carbon removal. It could be 5 times the size of India, or the equivalent of every single piece of farmland available on the entire planet. There's not enough space to plant trees. So you can kind of see that there are two sides to every story. And I guess to debate this, we're joined here today by, as we saw in the session before this one, we've got Diana. She is the CEO of Positive Luxury and Honourable Professor at the British School of Fashion. So Diana, I wonder if you just introduce yourself for us.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. So a little bit like Dale, I am first and foremost an environmentalist. and I have worked in sustainability now for almost 24 years. So it makes me a real veteran, really. Of course, I'm 24, so I started very young. And I wouldn't say my predecessors, but my mentors in this industry are people like Jonathan Porritt and John Elkington that started way, way, way before me, and a lot of people like me, Solitaire Townsend as well from Futera. When we came to the industry 23 years ago, sustainability was something that it was very niche, but the notions of climate change was very high. John Elkington started a company called Sustainability back in the 80s and wrote the first consumer guide back then, ethical consumer guide. So this is not new. So when we talk about carbon, it's probably one of the oldest conversations that we have been having. And everybody knows about scope 1, 2, 3, what comes from your suppliers and so on. But the area that I am the most passionate about when we talk about carbon is scope 4, which is avoided emissions, like Dale said. What can you actually not do? What you can say not to? And how you can actually put plans in place to better your business. I'm not a fan of carbon offsets by themselves, simply because they don't do the job. Like you said, is one thing that you can do, but actually the main thing is about benchmarking your business, understand where you are. And when you understood where you are, what is your mitigation strategies? And when you understand your mitigation strategy, what are the scope 4 actions that you could take, what you will not do? And then whatever is left, you can offset. So at Positive Luxury, we work with luxury lifestyle brands across 8 verticals, including retail, travel and hospitality, fashion, beauty, and so on. And we look at brands and we discuss with brands and we really help them to understand how can you actually create these strategies, mitigation strategies, in order to really, really get your impact right back, and then whatever is remaining offsets. But also in the offset world, there is different qualities of offsets. It's not just about planting trees. There is a gold standard of offsets, which are a lot more expensive than normal offset that I just plant any trees anywhere. There is a specific types of tree you have to plant, which are indigenous, and also the speed in which these trees grow is also very important. But that's not the only solution. There are so many different solutions, especially right now where technology plays such a huge role into really take carbon out of the atmosphere, like they'll have said. So, I mean, Clive and I had a really interesting conversation yesterday, and I think that the work that they're doing is actually really impressive for an aviation company, and I don't mean to say that in a controversial way, but I think it's like they have come a long way. Still a lot more way to go, but I really would like to give the floor to Clive, if I may, because I really think that the work that they're doing is impressive, but still there is a hell of a lot of work to be done.
I'd love to hear that from Clive, the other 24-year-old on the panel, the CEO of Victor Jets. Please, we'd love to hear your point. So Diana's saying, don't offset, reduce is essentially what you're looking to kind of boil down to. And she's this much lauded plan you have. I'd love to hear it, Victor. Please share.
Well, listen, first of all, thank you for having me here today. Just a couple of points of order. I'm not 24 years old, and I'm not the chairman. I'm not the CEO. Victor, I don't want the CEOs to feel like they've just been pushed out of a job. I was the CEO and founder. I'm now the executive chairman and founder. So I don't want to cause any consternation back at the headquarters. Yes, Diane and I had a very interesting and animated conversation yesterday with regards to this panel. So just to put into context, Victor's a private jet company. We broker private jets. We're 10 years old. And last year, in the year of 2020, a difficult year for all of us, we flew about 4,000 missions, 2.5 million miles. And I think we our planes that our passengers flew on emitted something close to 22,000 tons of CO2. So, we are the bad boys already. That doesn't preclude us from having a debate. And, I was very grateful for Diana to listen and engage with me yesterday, because we are polluting the atmosphere, period. And we're not doing it in a particularly efficient way, because on average we have 2 passengers on board each aircraft. So unlike a commercial airline flying that might be 180 to 350, and you divide the emissions between them, to your point, Andrew, offsetting the guilt, there's only 2 people on average on our plane. So that's a heck of a lot of guilt. So, just to put into context, why am I even here talking about it? Clearly, we provide a luxury service, at the very pinnacle of luxury. But in 2019, we made the commitment, having already worked at looking at our emissions. In 2019, we made a commitment to take positive action, and in doing so, guaranteed that every single one of our flights would be flying carbon neutral in relation to its emissions. And because there's a lot of woolliness around how you calculate that and what standards do you use, as on the previous panel, I think Dale was talking about, we decided to go 2x, double it. So whatever happens, if we're a little bit off by 10 or 15%, at least we would double it. And it wasn't an opt-in. It was mandated, period. End of story. As of the 19th of July, 2019, every single flight in the world, double carbon offset. And we'll come back to the question of offset in a moment. We paid for it. This came out of our marketing budget. We slashed our marketing budget and we channeled that money towards mitigating the effects of the carbon emissions from burning jet aviation fuel. So that was our stance. And our second stance was to say to our flyers, who are the luxury consumers that we're all engaged with, who frankly are the most able, the capable, the most wealthy in the world, to say to them, this is our truth, what's yours? And you're way more wealthier than us. So what about stepping up to the plate, putting your hand in your pocket and contributing? And we were starting from a low base of 0, because, if I'm doing it, they may turn around and say, well, why do I need to bother? If you take the airline industry as an example, less than 1% of flyers will make a personal contribution. And we set a target that at some point we wanted to get to 100% contribution from everyone who flew, not just what Victor puts in, but what they put in. And today we're just around about 10%. And it's, as Diane said, it's nowhere near good enough, but it's a start. And I think the third and most important piece that, we have done, which was the start of this year, was to turn over our data. As you guys were talking about in the previous panel, we turned over our data, all our flight movements, our flight emissions data, to an independent third party and said, audit it, and then check whether we did write the dollar check to the carbon offsetting partner, which is a gold standard approved partner, to take that money and do with it something very sensible, as best we can in today's market, to mitigate the effects of our carbon. So not only are we making the claim, we're willing to be audited and scrutinized about whether or not the actual check got sent, and it did. And it was $140,000 for a company our size. That's quite important. And during the course of 2022, I think that might be closer to $250,000. So it's money that's going in the right direction. And I think that then opens up the big debate that Diana was saying, was referencing, okay, where does that money go? How effective it is? Where else can we channel that funding? Because for us, it's a self-imposed tax. And then ultimately, what else could we be doing to change our industry and to influence others and inspire others to do more? Because if we wait for 26, if we wait for the governments to do things, we're kind of passing the buck. I think we all need to step up to the plate. And that's my position.
That's great. No, thanks so much for that, Clive. I find it, first of all, I love that you two met yesterday. You're not covered in too many bruises, which is nice to see, Clive. I think you've come out of it okay. I'd love to know, Diana, is Is Clive going far enough?
No, but I don't think the industry is going far enough. And there is things that the industry still can do because the technology and the innovation is not there. Um, and I don't think it's fair to put the blame onto the consumer in terms of you have to fly less. Look what has happened the last 2 years, right? You know, you get huge amount of very unhappy people all over the place. I think aviation, business aviation is going to be massively reduced. People are thinking in businesses whether they need to travel for work a lot more than they did before. So is it now sustainable to go for a meeting to Abu Dhabi for a night? Probably not. We can jump on Zoom and do it, and we have been trained for long enough to do so. But I think that I think innovation, it's very much required, and it's about how do we disrupt the industry completely. I mean, we have seen this happening in the automotive industry. Tesla is one of the newcomers. There's other companies which are challenging Tesla for batteries and lithium and so on. So I think innovation is definitely the way. And how do we actually motivate this innovation to accelerate? Because we don't have 30 years to wait. We, like Dale said, we need action now. We are kind of a little bit bored of empty promises, and we just need action. Yeah. So I think that the opportunity for the industries to come together, regardless whether it's private aviation or whether it's not private aviation, and really think about what is the innovation that they can do and how they can work with jet manufacturers to actually accelerate this process.
So that, again, interesting. So Clive, I think over to you on that. It feels like we're heading towards how long before tech is so advanced that we have electric flight. It feels like we're going down that kind of road. What's your take on that? Well,
look, first of all, I probably want to take it up a level in the context of what we're talking about is complex. There are multiple different views and opinions about what works and what doesn't work. And as Diane and I found out yesterday, we've all got to be willing to listen to the other side. And not just find a report, as was mentioned in the previous panel, that there isn't enough surface area to plant trees to be able to mitigate the effects of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And yet I can equally find a credible report that says there is. So, the moment we find something that supports our cause and we hold on to it religiously and bang that drum, is that we actually stifle the opportunity to have an open and inclusive debate, and one that brings people with us as opposed to turn people off. So I'm saying it is a very complex arena. When we take the vertical that I'm in, which is aviation, and in a previous life, I was ex-British Airways, so I spent a stint in commercial aviation. The issue really facing us at the moment is, yes, we need investment in technology, and no, it's not enough. So we need to talk about where does that funding come from? What is the return on investment? And what is the time scale? But in the same breath, we've also got to recognize that investment in aviation in terms of airframe design, what paint film they put on an aircraft skin to make it more slippery and reduce drag, to the efficiencies of engines, to the lightness of materials that go into aircraft, we are beginning to reach the top of the bell curve in terms of the efficiency gain. So the reality of it is, if you want to fly a big plane in the sky today, your only option is fossil fuel. And our industry is lauding the potential of sustainable aviation fuel. But that in itself is not a solution in its own right. It's a combination of solutions that we need to look to. So if I park sustainable aviation fuel for a moment, because the big question there is how long, how much, and how do you distribute it? You could also have the same argument about hydrogen. What comes out of the back of a hydrogen engine is not CO2. What comes out of the back of an engine that flies sustainable aviation fuel is CO2. It's no different than burning standard fossil fuel that has been refined from the ground through to diesel, through to aviation fuel. So the reality of it is, if we really wanted to look at what was the cleanest energy source, it's hydrogen. But the issues around infrastructure and capability are such that there isn't the investment there, and there's some real big intrinsic, challenges to introduce hydrogen. Hydrogen at an airport is maybe a $2 to $4 million investment to have a hydrogen pump and a storage tank.
Fairly,
that
big numbers.
You want to try hydrogen into your everyday BP and Shell petrol station up and down the United Kingdom. It's just we've spent 100 years getting fossil fuel into the infrastructure network. It's going to take a lot longer. Well, a lot longer than what we think in the timescale that we're trying to operate to get alternative fuel sources into that infrastructure system. So when we think about what can we do in the immediacy, as Diana pointed out, we've got to do something now. And some of that is looking at innovative technology. And yes, there is a hydrogen fuel cell manufacturer that has just raised $6.5 million to build a hydrogen fuel cell to go in what they hope would be the first passenger helicopter and the first passenger light aircraft. And that's great. That's very exciting. All right. They're called High Point. So I'm not here to give them a plug because I've only just researched and found out about them. But my point here is 6.5 million is nothing. It is chicken feed. And if we want to invest in infrastructure, we have to take a governmental driven, top down, working in concert with industry approach to alternative fuel sources. As I said, if we wanted hydrogen on the roads in the United Kingdom, it's a very, very different conversation to using electricity where we already have it, A, at petrol stations and B, at homes. The question about investment requires a much, much bigger set of thinking and a different set of people, I fear, to who are currently advising governments or common select committees as to what they should be doing.
If I may, I'm from Argentina, which is the bottom of the Americas, really, and we have been having hydrogen cell in buses and cars, especially taxis, for decades. So I grew up with it. And I'm not 24 actually. So the thing is that the poorest countries. Well, we are not a rich country by any means. We are rich in biodiversity and rich in fauna, but we're not a rich country. So I think the countries which have most need are the ones that are coming up with this innovation. What we need is innovation is great, but it's always is before scale. That's what innovation is. When you put scale into the seed of innovation is where something takes off. And that takes quite a long time. So I know that there is innovation in the developing world come from the absolute sheer need to meet the basic needs. We just need, and I'm putting my Argentinian hat for a second, or my developing world hat, we just need this systemic thinking from the developed world to actually give the chance to these poorer economies to actually shine, because only by thinking systemically, like Clive said, and working together, is we can actually get out of this climate crisis.
Yeah.
Well, my sense that the obligation that the developing world, and let's just take a vertical industry and then players within a vertical industry, I think the obligation that we have is not to mislead or make false claims or empty promises. And I think fundamentally this point about whether governments are just full of promises and no action, we need to see positive action. Positive action starts with, well, what is the actual extent of the problem? Now, if I take my aviation industry, and I am not going to win any friends for what I'm about to say, we should publish the emissions of every flight, commercial and private, flown in the last 24 hours on a global website. That's a great starting point, because whatever anyone else claims that they're going to do about addressing the issue of emissions, avoid, reduce, or mitigate, or all of them, right? Let's see who actually walks the talk, who really does deliver on it, or they just say, hey, carbon offsetting or carbon sequestration or whatever it might be is available and it's a free consumer choice. in my book, I think there is an obligation to first of all start with what's the size of the problem that we're trying to solve in our industry. We know what we produce in total tonnage, but let's break it down and shine a spotlight. Victor does this. Well, Victor, what are you going to do? XYZ, NetJets does this. What are you going to do? ABC Airline does that. What are you going to do? What did you do last year and what did you do this year? And that then makes people accountable because we've got visibility, we have transparency. And if you have both of those, you can start to get trust. And that's so important because there's so much stuff being said about this issue of emissions and how to tackle it. People switch off. What we want to know is the extent of the problem. And if we reduced it by 400,000 tons against 800,000 tons, well, we're 50% of the way through. And if we can prove it, great. That's what we need. That's where we.
That's a strong idea. I think capturing it. I don't know that we're too far away from that. And my reasoning is, and this is I guess the final question as we come up to time. But so the people advising the government that we talked about, who are giving us maybe slow progress, are what they have in common with the top 1% who have this bigger carbon footprint than average, etc., is that they're not 24. Right, they've grown up with fossil fuels. They've grown up with the average age is a little bit older, kind of 45 plus. So they've grown up in a slightly different world. Conversely, the people who really are 24, these people who are coming into our world, our future customers, or even indeed our consumers now, they are acutely aware of facts and demanding transparency and this kind of urgent action from industry. So, Clive, interestingly, and we'll come to you first just for the final minute, maybe we're not too far away from having everything published. I mean, how do we work with this future upcoming demographic?
Well, I think as I said, if you split it out on a vertical industry basis, and you look at each industry in terms of if there is a way of calculating what that contributes in terms of carbon to the atmosphere, then you have a starting point. I think in the context of our business, it's very easy to calculate, a gallon of aviation fuel produces X pounds of carbon dioxide. But where you look at manufacturing and other related services, we need transparency. We need some level of efficacy around that calculation. And it might be just as in food standards, when we look at the calorific content and the soil content and the nutritional value of a product that you buy, we also need to see the associated carbon with that production of that food stuff, and also what was associated with transporting it halfway around the world. And I think at that point, when you talk to the younger generation and they pick up a packet and look at that, they'll think, you know what, I don't think I want to buy it. I'll go local and buy my courgette, or local and buy my organic strawberries. And I think you've got to educate people, and you've got to do it in a balanced way if you want them to make an informed decision. And I personally feel that consumers have the greatest power. If they all voted not to buy X from X brand today, that brand will change its spots overnight. So I think it's a combination of governmental, environmental pressure points, and I also think it's a point of encouraging consumers to get engaged.
Yeah, take some of the responsibility. I think that's a good point. And Diana, your view on talking with the younger generation?
I don't particularly think that we need to put the burden onto the younger generation for them to make the decision not to travel or not to do things. I think that the responsibility is 100% of businesses and governments to actually be able to have a sustainable production in order for us to have better choices in order to do sustainable production. So if I'm in a diet, I can choose here and that. And then ultimately, I have options. But right now, there is no options. So even that we can disclose what the impact is, the marginal differences between A and B are so small to actually make a difference from a greater perspective. So I stick to my point, which is I really think that what we need is coming together as an industry and actually coming together, all industries, and start thinking about how do we radically change the system to be able to have a different outcome and a different world in that the people that come after us be able to enjoy the same things that we had when we grew up. And unless we do that together, we are not going to get there.
I think just to add to that, Diana, I fully support that. I think, at the end of the day, one of the most intrinsic, basic facets of human life and human evolution is that we all aspire to a better life for ourselves and our families. That's just natural. That's what's made us evolve. We in the West cannot take that opportunity away from those that are living in third world countries that want to aspire to a better life, regardless of what we might have done in the last 50 years here in the West. And that requires preserving the freedom of choice to fly, choice to travel, choice to buy this, choice to do that. But I do believe that those choices that we choose to exercise come with it certain obligations to understand that our choices have impact on the environment. Our choices to buy a diamond that is not a synthetic diamond is a choice that we make. So when we want to move consumers from choice A to choice B, we have to educate, inform, and encourage them to make those choices. It's still a choice, but that's the important thing.
Thank you. And to both of you, thank you so much for joining. It's been absolutely wonderful to come out of this unscathed. Thanks to everybody else for dialing in. I think we're coming to an end. Just don't forget to dial back in at 11:50 for Natalie Johnson, who'll be talking about an introduction to non-fungible tokens. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.